what we want to do with NAT is to do several things. What we want to do is do several things. We want to be able to use our private IP addresses because, again, we're out of IPv4 addresses, have been out of IPv4 addresses for a while. The other thing that it allows us to do is to conceal our internal IP addressing scheme. Third thing it does is gives us some sort of security, because when we come up against the public IP address and then it switches to the other one, and we're only netting in one direction. So somebody comes up to, this is our private in here, over here where it says inside local, and we'll talk about those just in a second. When I come up to this address and I have a public address, I don't have any way to get into the private address unless there is some sort of a translation process, a NAT. We can use, and typically we use going from inside out, going from private to public. We can go the other way around. And we'll look at one over here of a static one. In this case, we have a web server. A web server, here, get it in here, a web server sitting inside of our private network. In order to do that, then I need to be able to translate the public address to a private address. And we're going to use a port too, obviously, to restrict what users can do. So we have our sockets again here. We can, on the private to public, a couple of ways to do this. One is a process called PAT, Port Address Translation, where we have one IP address, one public IP address, and then we use port numbers. We append port numbers to it to have multiple sockets, and be able to go from one to the other. Because when we go out from here, regardless of what we're doing, we're leaving from a socket, going to a socket, an IP address and a port number. We can do that, or we can use a pool, and we'll do both of these. Create a pool of public IP addresses and then do a one-to-one address translation where each of the privates gets assigned a public address as it goes onto the internet. So with that, let's take a look at some of the things we can do. A little checklist over here, steps for PAT. We'll do it first, and then we'll do dynamic NAT. First, we're going to label the interfaces. And we're going to label the interfaces IPNAT inside and IPNAT outside. One of the things that I've got set up backwards on this one, FA00 and FA01. So 00 really, when you're doing this, to part of the, keep everything consistent. 0 looks like an O, so if I redid it, I would make this the outside interface because the O looks like the outside and the 1 looks like the inside. I've got them backwards. I need to remember that I've got them backwards so that I don't mess this up. So the first thing we're going to do is go into this router here. Let me bring it over and open on the other screen, and we will enable and then config T and do interface fast Ethernet 0/0, which is my inside interface, and IP NAT inside. We have to label them because we're going to either NAT inside out or outside in. So interface fast Ethernet 0/1. This will be IP NAT outside. So 01 is outside and 00 is inside. The next on my list is an access control list. We haven't configured those yet, so just trust me on this one. What the access control list is going to tell us is which of the internal IP addresses can be NATed, which of them are going to get the translation, which of the addresses are able to get on the internet, which means that we don't have to allow every device onto the internet. We have an access control list which will limit what goes on here. So I'm going to do access list, access ACC. How about if I go into config mode, probably would work better, huh? Access list 1, and we're going to permit, we're going to permit the entire IP subnet here, which is 192.168.1. 0.0.0, and then we use a wildcard mask, 0.0.0.255, which is the whole network for this thing. The 0, check to see if it's 192. The 0, check to see if it's 168. The 0, check to see if it's 1, and then the 255, the ones. So any address in there will work for this. So we have done the first two steps. The next one is enable NAT. So what we're going to do is enable NAT. So what we will do with it is we're in the config mode. So we got that. We'll do IP NAT, config mode, config. Let me do IP, and then if we do this thing, NAT, IP NAT, and then we're going to NAT the inside, and the inside we're going to NAT the source list, and that's going to be the same list number. If I do the question mark here, it's either a word for a named list or a number for the numbered list, and we use the numbered list, and it was 1. And then we're going to interface pool. We don't have a pool. That's going to be the next thing that we do. So we will do the interface, but before we do that interface, and we'll come back to it, what I want to do is to kind of show what we're doing. We're trying to get to this 117.45.23.1 over here by making this a public address, routable address between the two. If I go to this one, and I've done a couple of things here, if I ping the 23.2, I'm in great shape. 23.2 is on my router, so I can get there. And this is one of the things, how far can I get with these things? If I ping the 23.1, I can't get there. It actually may get there, but wouldn't know how to get back, but not a routable address to get to this network. So the private IP address is the 192s. We shouldn't be able to see them routed on the internet. So I did the interface, and then I'm going to give this interface fast Ethernet 0/1, the outside interface. I'm NATing inside, NAT inside to the outside interface. If I don't give a pool address, it will use the IP address of that interface in order to do the NATing. The overload command says, okay, do more than one address. Go into port address translation, where we use the IP address, multiple ports. We have a whole bunch of ports that we can use. More ports than IP addresses, obviously. So we go into that to create sockets using that particular IP address. And that is hopefully the end all and the be all of this thing. 23.1. I'm now getting there. If I want to see the translations, I can come back to here and do a show IP NAT translations, and I have the inside global, and I want to talk about those, the inside local. The insides are basically mine. They are our global obviously to go on the internet, local, private, outside local and outside global, we don't have any control over. We really don't know what the outside local address, what the inside address is at the other side. But we know the outside global because that's the one we're going to. And these things create unique sockets in order to do the translation. And this is what a NAT table would look like, showing the translation from the private, the inside local, to the global, the routable, the inside global, my addresses. And that's what these colors here show. The inside local is us. That's our private IP addressing. And then we have the globals out here in the red. That's the internet. The inside global are the ones that we own. The outside global is what the other guy owns. And then the outside local is what the other guy owns. So the initial configuration, Pat, pretty straightforward. What I want to do now is to take this off, and I could go back and take everything else off. Okay, so you can control config T, and we'll do, what I'm going to do is the IP NAT, that was IP NAT inside, source list. We didn't have that. I'm trying to find the, oh, here we go. Here we go, right here, huh? What I want to do here is to undo this. So we have this in the config mode, config, and I'll do a no, and then paste this, and we should now not have any configurations. Let's see if we have any configurations to be sure it went away. If we go in here, we theoretically won't be able to get there, and not just theoretically, we can't get there. Let me write down 117.45, 117.45.23. And because I need to create a pool here on the next one, so we're not getting there. I could go back and take the inside and the outside label off if you really want to, and go back and label them again, but it seems like a waste of time. I could do the no access list 1, permit that, do a no in front of it, and go back and rewrite it. So I'm just going to leave those things there when we do that. The difference between the inside local and the global: the inside local are the private IP addresses. The inside global are our public, our routable IP addresses. The question there for that, does that assigned by ISP, assigned by the IPv4 come from the IANA, I think. ISPs assign IPv6 addresses. They could be, actually I say IANA, the IANA goes to the ISPs. Yeah, it would be by the ISP. You're absolutely right. So we'll say ISP is assigned by the authority that owns the IP address. And when I thought back, yeah, our public addresses did come from the provider when we did those things. So yeah, from the ISP. The public addresses are the routable ones that do those things. So we did that. Now then, we need to, first thing, we'll go back and look and see what we do. The dynamic NAT, label the interfaces, access control list, those are the things that we've done. And then the address pool. So what we want to do here is to now create the address pool when we do those things. So access list, and it'll be IP NAT, and then the question mark here, pool. Let me try. I hit the caps lock here. Pool, and then the pool, the word is going to be the pool name, and let's just say public, or let's say public. We're going to need that in a little bit. Public, and then after that, the starting IP address, and that's why I wrote those down. Let's do 117.45.23. Let's do 10 just to get it out of a range here, and then the ending IP address 117.45.23. Yeah, let's go to 20. And then the net mask, and this is kind of an odd one here. We have to actually type net mask, and then the network mask after we type that 255.255.255.0, and then after that the carriage return. Now we have created the pool. The next thing that we do is the IP NAT. So it's IP NAT inside again, and then the source is going to be source list or source static if we're doing a static natting. So source list 1, and then the pool, the name of the pool for the public IP address, source list 1, and I just called it public, I think. Public, and then let's see, source list, let's see, how about pool? Pool, source list 1, pool, public. Can't continue that one because it's just there. And then we're still going to use the overload command. The overload command, if we run out of addresses, then instead of stopping the NAT process, we will just automatically go into PAT until we get the addresses back. The pool, when a device uses the pool, it takes an address out of the pool, uses it for that session. When it gets done, the conversation gets over, it gives the address back to the pool. So with any luck again here, and we'll do a show IP Nat Translations, and we don't have any right now. Let's see if I got this right. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. So we're going to go to the 23.1 here again, and this one may or may not. Sometimes I've got to do this a couple of times. Okay, now we're in business, and you know, sometimes it takes, sometimes we got to wake them up a little bit when we do those things. And now we do the show IP Nat Translations. So I'm using the 10 address, which was the first address that I have from the 192.168. 1.2 is now translated the inside local, the private IP address that we're using on our network, translated to the inside global, the public address, the routable address that we have on the public net, on the internet, the routable network. The outside local and the outside global, again, we don't really know what they are. They're the other guy, and it's again a perspective. If you're the other guy, then you'll have, these will be your inside global, wherever we are, different locations. The other thing that I said that I would do or show here is to just show, instead of making you endure, the static addressing for this thing. So here's just the IPNAT inside source static instead of the pool or the interface. It's going to be, the source is going to be static. TCP 192.168.2.2, which is the web server that's on the inside, and then the outside interface. I actually did this one backwards. You can do it either way. We could have done an IPNAT outside and had the outside address at the front end and the inside address in the at the end. So what I should be able to do now, the 23.1, is go from this guy, and let's see if it will work. The web browser, HTTP 117.45.23.1, I think is that one. So I'm now getting to, and this is what the packet tracer web page looks like. I'm now able to get to the web page that's on this server that is inside the network. Why you use a static NAT? If we want to give somebody access to resources internally. Is it a good idea? No, not necessarily, because now we have those users from someplace else on our private network. So we've natted from here through this to this ISP router, and then natted through the ISP router to the web server on the inside. Let me